Tammy, thank you so much for sharing. And now we'll have Greg Sparks.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Greg Sparks. I'm an Assistant Vice Chancellor in the Office of Information Technology at NC State. Also one of the two individuals that serves as our Chief Technology Officer here at NC State. My path was, I guess, more of a traditional path. IT folks move around a lot. The first few years of my career were in manufacturing, which was really neat because we were out on the manufacturing floor figuring out how to automate things and bring technology to the shop floor. Then I moved into healthcare for a few years and then ended up at NC State 21 years ago. And so it's been really fun and educational to be in higher education all these years. As far as leadership and management roles, I became a manager really early in my career. I was very fortunate and kind of latched on to every opportunity to take on more and more responsibilities. And so I've been in this ABC role for about 12 years now.
Greg, thank you so much. Next, we'll have Daniel Velez.
Hi, everyone. My name is Daniel Velez. I'm the Vice President for Enrollment Management, Student Affairs, and Student Success, which means that I get to do everything I'm told at St. Augustine's University here in beautiful Raleigh, North Carolina. We are in the heart of Southeast Raleigh. And I've been in higher education for over 20 years. I've joined the HBCU world a year ago during COVID. Prior to that, with my 20-year career, I've been in state system education systems in Ohio, New York with the SUNY system, and in PASHE, the Pennsylvania state system, serving in a number of roles as Assistant Vice President, Assistant to the Vice President, Associate VP, for student success, auxiliary services, and in these, the enrollment management area as well. I came into higher education thinking that I was actually going to work in secondary education as an activities coordinator, because when I was in high school as a first-gen student and really saw that my high school teachers were having quite a bit of fun doing this thing called activities. And I said, well, I'd love to do that as well. So there has to be a career in activities, leadership development. When I got into college, that's when I learned of the professions, student affairs, and at the time, student personnel administration. And much like Greg Sparks, I never said no. And I'm not suggesting that that's the path for you, but I never said no to any opportunity. I'm not saying I said yes, but I never said no. Great to be here.
Daniel, thank you so much for sharing. Our next panelist is Renata.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Renata Dusenberry, Vice President for Academic Affairs at Shaw University. Shaw, for those who may not know, is downtown Raleigh. So we are literally 2 blocks away from where a lot of the activities on Fayetteville Street occur in Raleigh. How did I get to where I am today at Shaw University? Well, I actually started out as a researcher. When I got my degree from Chapel Hill in genetics, I continued on to do postdoc work at Yale University and as a research scientist. So never had any ideas I was going to teach. And then came back to North Carolina to get married and started teaching and enjoyed it, but then transitioned to working in forensics. So I started, I was the first manager of the SBI crime lab. And, but when my child got to be of elementary school age, I said, I need a job. I can have the weekends off, the summers off. So I decided I was going to go into education and started teaching again, and have been doing that for about 26, 27 years at a number of institutions, primarily HBCUs, and started as a faculty person. And within a very short period of time, ended up becoming a department head, and then a dean, and then associate vice president, and then a vice president. So it's been a quick trajectory. And as everyone else has mentioned, when opportunities occur, and also I truly believe in service. So had the opportunity to serve the institutions I was at in those capacities in leadership, and have greatly enjoyed it. I call it crisis management, however, but it's been a great ride.
Renata, thank you so much for sharing. Our next panelist is Benita Clark.
Hello, everyone. Again, I'm Benita Clark, Vice President of Human Resources and College Safety here at Wake Technical Community College. I have been an HR professional for over 25 years. I've had most of my career was in the corporate world. I joined Wake Tech in 2010. The company that I work for, they transitioned all of their human resources and payroll to Texas. I did not want to go to Texas, so I found myself unemployed and needed to find a job, and I happened to find this job in higher education. I had never worked in higher ed or even like a state institution, so everything was brand new. I felt like I had landed on Mars, and Mars is a wonderful place to be. I have enjoyed working for Wake Tech for the last 11 years. I couldn't even imagine going back into the corporate world where most of us could go back and make more money. I love working for Wake Tech because it's all about the community and the students that we have here. In my role, I also have the environmental health and safety reports to me, as well as the chief of police. That's the safety piece. And I love having a police officer at my beck and call. That's a good thing to have in these days. But my role, my path here into leadership, I guess it was I raised my hand too much. So as you constantly raise your hand and take on new initiatives, then the more that you learn and grow. But being part of the higher ed community has been very rewarding to me. And I look forward to seeing what the new year's going to bring for us, and also just sharing any tips that I can today in leadership development.
Benita, thank you so much for sharing. And next we'll have Frank Rizzo.
Good day, everyone. As you mentioned, my name is Frank Rizzo, and I grew up in New York City and was a finance major, and was offered a job on Wall Street and was very excited to take that job. But at the same time, I, as a student, got very involved in community service. And with a group of students, we helped start an organization called Global Outreach at Fordham in New York City. And that really opened up my eyes to different things. After college, much to the dismay of my entire family, I took a job doing service work out in Seattle, and ran youth and young adult programs and helped Asian immigrants transition into the United States. And from there, I just continued to grow a passion and realized I needed to do a lot more with counseling. So I took some classes at Seattle University in counseling, ended up being offered the job from the director of global outreach at Fordham. And so I flew back cross country and took over as the director of global outreach. And there I got a master's in psychological and educational counseling. And also started, again, like many of the panelists said, I couldn't say no to things. So I kept taking on different tasks, and I could be a faculty in residence. I could teach this, I could do that. And started collecting things for my resume. And after a few years there, I transitioned to Miami, where I became the director of residence life and housing and activities at St. Thomas University, Miami. After several years there, I became a dean of students at Marymount University in Arlington, Virginia. And I then arrived at William Peace University, which was Peace College previously, but in 2012, it went from an all-women's college to being a coeducational institution. And that's when I arrived. I arrived with the rest of the men at Peace back in 2012 as the vice president for student life.
Frank, thank you so much. And I just want to give another thank you to all the panelists for introducing themselves and sharing a little bit about their paths and their careers. Thank you. And next, what I'll be doing is I'll be reading questions. And we do ask at least 3 panelists will answer each question. If we're unable to do so, of course, that's fine. And I'll be calling on you, and you can just raise your hand, and we like for you to use the option at the very bottom, the raise hand feature. And if you would use that when you're ready to answer. Our first question for today states, regarding leadership, what is the one piece of advice you'll never forget? Daniel?
The one piece of advice I'll never forget is wait. Why am I talking? I'll never forget a mentor of mine who really emphasized, and this really ties into another question about skills, emphasize the importance of you have two eyes, two ears, one mouth. Utilize your eyes and ears more than your mouth. There's a lot of learning that you will glean from that approach. So when you think you should speak, wait a minute and see what comes next. You may be surprised.
Frank?
I was originally going to say very much a similar thing to Daniel. I heard that advice with 2 ears and 2 eyes, but I would say also I heard, and I think I really used the advice of never take yourself too seriously or a situation. Remember that when things get really stressful, that it's not personal. A lot of times things appear personal. It's like I have to check myself at the door and say, you know what, this isn't personal. And I need to respect that.
Renata?
Take myself off of mute. I was told to be informed. Make sure that you find out as much information you can about what you're doing, your position, policies and procedures, strategic plan, so that you are well informed so that you can carry out your job, to the best of your ability. So I was told to make sure you read as much as possible about what you're doing, and also to allow yourself to grow.
Thank you, Renata.
You're welcome.
Benita?
So I think the best advice that I've been given by one of my mentors is to own up to your mistakes. Own up to your mistakes, learn from them, and move on. Don't dwell into the past. And if your employees, the people that report to you, see that you're willing to own up to your mistakes, they'll follow. And therefore, you'll create an environment of trust and safety, where you're not trying to hide your mistake or catch it on your own. You can ask somebody to even help you repair your mistake. So I live that daily. If I make a mistake, I raise my hand, my bad, I own this, let's figure out how we're gonna fix it.
Thank you, Benita. Greg?
So far down the list, Benita stole mine, but I will expand just a little bit. Also sharing what you learn, particularly in the IT profession. Keep others from making that same mistake. And as Benita said, it's really about building that culture where people feel really comfortable admitting mistakes. And so, yeah, that has served me really well also.
Tammy?
Again, following behind Benita and Greg, same advice as far as owning up to your mistakes and being accountable and being that example for your team, but also making sure that your team realizes that you always have their back and that you're never going to leave them out there because again, you're that leader. And so you want to make sure that it's a learning experience at the end of the day.
Thank you, panelists. Our next question, who is the most influential person in your development as a leader? Renata?
Actually, it was another vice president, a female vice president, and she was just awesome. She believed in team development and developing the people around her. And there were times when I was wondering, because she was the one who suggested or highly suggested that I become a department chair and also to become a dean and also to become an associate vice president. And she was an awesome mentor and she led by example. And so I really, really credit her greatly for where I am today because you know, sometimes you don't know if you have all those qualities that you may think that you need to have. And so she was extremely supportive in my trajectory. And her name is Dr. Marilyn Sutton Haywood. So she is, like I said, my sister, my role model, you know, my previous boss. And even though she's left years ago, we stay in contact.
Thank you, Renata. Tammy?
You know, I will say it, for me, it really was starting from my youth. So it was embedded in me from a very, very young age with my father always saying, be a leader, not a follower. And with that, it was more so along the line of, you know what's right, you do what's right at all times. You let your integrity and your character lead you through, and never be unwavering in that. And again, that accountability and helping those along the way as much as possible. And I kind of always kept that with me. So when I actually was able to have a mentor and they were echoing some of the same sentiments my father had shared when I was a child, it just resonated that much more, so that this is exactly what you need to do as far as how to be on that path, how to be a leader, of just really just standing firm and having that integrity and that character, of always putting your best foot forward as well. So I would say that those are words that I live by to this day. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Tammy. Greg?
So I want to cheat because I didn't like the question. I think all of us have been influenced by so many individuals, you know, and as I think through, you know, there were youth ministers, there were supervisors, there are supportive friends, all of that. So I wanted to tweak the answer a little bit and say, really, it's about learning from everyone, and particularly leaders that you interact with, and not just the strengths, but their weaknesses. I've learned just as much from leaders that I thought, why in the world did they take that approach? And it causes me to think about what would I do in that situation. And that adds just as much to your toolbox as looking at a leader and saying, oh, I love the way she handled that situation. And so, you know, I think taking all those things to put in your toolbox is really what makes all of us the leaders that we are. Sorry for cheating.
Thank you, Greg. And next it'll be Frank.
I do like Greg's response, by the way. I was thinking about a particular individual, though, which was my college advisor. And I mentioned I was a business major, I was a finance major, and my finance professor used to always say, you can add as much value in your life from a dollar perspective, but the value you place in people and relationships is the most important value you'll ever receive. And that really stuck with me, and is kind of what I live by, you know, not accepting a job on Wall Street and deciding to change my past. And it's definitely, I feel very wealthy from the perspective of having lots of value and people being able to affect their lives, definitely not financially working in higher ed, but the true value and that respect that you gain from what you do and the lives you affect and can see the product, I think is really, truly what inspired me.
Panelists, thank you all for sharing. I was able to learn some from each one of you, so thank you so much. Our next question, what is the most important skill set a leader in education should develop? Frank?
I definitely say flexibility is the most important thing, knowing that things are going to shift. We always jokingly say shift happens, and it's so true. So I think that's an incredibly important lesson, is to be able to, you might have plans. I'm a very organized person. I like to have plans. And then I realize every time I have a full plan, something's going to happen where I don't have to adjust. And I think that ability to say, it's okay. It's going to be fine. It's not what I planned. I think we all learned that through COVID. The year was not what we planned, but how can we make it the best experience? And then it's like, I said, okay, it's more of a challenge. And looking at it from that perspective, I think is something I think is valuable.
Frank, thank you. Benita?
I would say to be passionate, you know, with the communities that we serve, and we're dealing with students, employees, faculty members, everyone brings their own challenges. And if they don't see that you're passionate and what you're doing about what the services that you're providing, that you're not invested 100% in their success, then what are we here for? So if I had be a little bit like Frank and cheat a little bit, my second thing would be honesty, because we could do everything every leadership book ever told us to do about what makes a successful leader. But if your employees and your students and faculty can't trust you, it's all for naught. So be passionate and be honest.
Thank you, Benita. Renata?
And I want to add to Benita's, because I like the passion and the honesty. I think it's important to build teams, to, support your people. And team building is not just in your area. You develop teams and collaborations with people you have to in order to be, a successful leader, in my opinion, with those people on your university campus and other units on campus. So making sure that, like I said, you build a team, so that they know that you support them and that you care about them. That goes to the passion portion. And so that is what I think is also important as a leader.
Greg?
So again, part of mine got stolen, but I'll still elaborate. Frank talked about flexibility. I had listen and adapt, right? You need to listen and then react and stay flexible, be able to adapt to your surroundings. The other thing about this question that I kind of gave some reflection on was the education and higher ed. I think leadership skills are highly transferable. And so, more advice would be, don't get hung up on staying in one vertical. You heard during the intros, a number of us spent time in the corporate sector. We worked in different areas for different universities all over the place. So don't be afraid to branch out. The leadership books that my team and I have been reading, they're from ministers, from military leaders, from Silicon Valley executives. Leadership is a great skill to take with you wherever you go. So don't feel like you're confined to one particular spot.
Thank you, Greg. Next, we'll have Daniel.
Thank you. So many years ago, I was selected as a participant to go with the Return Peace Corps volunteers to the Navajo Nation reservation for about 10 days. And there I met someone who had his hair was very long and braided. And he talked about the purpose of this braid in reminding him that his decisions, his head is connected to his heart. And that always remember that one cannot survive without the other. That when you are in a situation, don't be afraid to let your heart guide your head, and don't forget that you have a heart that should guide your head. Often we think in leadership that you should not be emotional, and that so the whole notion of having a heart should not even be discussed. But you remember that you're leading people, and as someone said about team building, you're investing in people. That's the number one resource you have. And if your people feel that you care about them because your decisions are grounded as well in your heart, then you're going to be a successful leader. That helps you remember when someone on your team says, they have childcare issues. How do you help that person manage their childcare issues in a way that's empathetic and not in a way that makes it appear like you're heartless. So always remember that it's okay to have a heart.
Daniel, thank you so much and for your response, as well as our other panelists. Our next question for today: how do you keep your team motivated despite conflicts and obstacles? Tammy?
Unmute myself there. Keeping them motivated has been one where you have to really be truthful and honest. I think that goes a long way. If you let them know what we're dealing with up front, that we're all in it together, that you're rolling up your sleeves, you're being that collaborative partner. That goes a long way with helping with resolving conflicts, with helping keeping individuals motivated, and just allowing team members to feel appreciated, that it's not all on just them, but that we're all in together.
Tammy, thank you. Frank?
I would say to keep motivated is realizing that every person is unique and needs things different. So everyone needs to be motivated differently. So kind of realizing that it may be even difficult for me sometimes to say, okay, I need to motivate that person by speaking to them on a regular basis or complimenting them or for great work they've done, which some stuff that might not always come natural, but I know I need to motivate different staff differently, and kind of reminding myself what that is for each individual person, and also having the courage to ask them, how are you motivated? What do you need yourself to be motivated? And, what makes you excited to be, in our case, at peace and continue to serve our students?
Greg?
I'm not raising my hand anymore. My answers keep getting stolen. No, so to Frank's point, I spent a lot of time. A few years ago, we read a book about motivation and extrinsic motivation versus intrinsic motivation. And that boils down to basically, you can't make anybody do anything. It's always funny when people look at, folks in our positions, and they're like, just go tell so-and-so to do something. It just doesn't work that way. It might work short term, but it's surely not going to work long term. And so it really is about finding out what is going to get that individual motivated. The thing I'll add is it's really about helping that individual understand how he or she contributes to the overall goal. Keep that long-term goal in vision for everyone. And I think as leaders, that's our job to help connect the dots, is what I call it. How does that person help us meet the goal? And then also, and somebody said this in the opening, don't forget to have fun along the way. It's a lot easier to stay motivated when you're having a little bit of fun. Especially the tougher things are, that's the more that you need to pull back just for a little while and say, wait a second, let's take just a breath here and then get back to work.
Thank you, Greg. Renata?
And I just want to add to Greg, and that, what Greg just said, and, also making sure that your team and your staff and the people that report to you know that they're appreciated. I think that goes a long way. Simple thank you, or we see what you're doing. So I think that really, really helps and keeps people motivated to let them know that they are appreciated.
Thank you, panelists, for your responses. Our next question: what's the most important risk you took and why? Benita?
So I had the unfortunate experience of having to work for a very bad leader. And I hope none of you've had that same experience, but more than likely at some point in your career you have. And he was not an ethical person. And so he didn't lead our HR department with a moral compass, with a good moral compass. And so, I grew up in Kentucky. We were relatively poor, and my mother just pounded into me, you don't ever quit a job unless you have another one. Because once we left home, her goal was for us not to come back. So I had this great job, great company, but this very unethical boss. And for the first time and last time in my career history, I quit a job and just took a risk without having another one, because I could not let my reputation be damaged. Because of all things, your reputation, your word is who you are. And if you can't maintain, and if you can't walk in integrity and feel good about getting up every day and going to the place that you enjoy working and admire people, and when you look at the leadership at the top of your command, chain of command, then it's not worth it. There's nothing's worth damaging your reputation or anything that's going to impede your ability to walk with integrity. So that was the biggest risk I took. Luckily, my mama did let me come home and stay for a little bit, until I could get back on my feet. But having priorities and being able to stand tall, nothing beats that.
Thank you, Benita. Greg?
You notice I waited that time to make sure that, my answer wasn't going to get stolen. No, there's a couple of things. There is the leaving a job is always scary. And that is one. I wrote down two quick ones because they're very different answers to the same question. When I came into higher ed, this was alluded to earlier, I took a pretty hefty pay cut when I made the move. And I kind of saw a path, though. I saw a different path. It was an area I wanted to get back to. NC State was my alma mater. It seemed like something that was going to be people oriented. And healthcare, believe it or not, certain aspects of it are not very people oriented. And I missed that. And so I wanted to get back to that. And it's worked out, really, really well. The other one really quick was more of a career decision, right? You have these decisions, and I think all of us face these. There are these things that there's a picture over in my office that says, the essence of leadership is kind of the standalone thing. I think a lot of us sometimes make decisions that aren't necessarily that popular. We do our homework. And sometimes it's just worth the risk. And one of those was a new technology that we were looking at NC State. And I literally had lobbyists going downtown lobbying against what I wanted to do because it was going to cost a certain vendor millions of dollars. But I knew it was going to save NC State millions of dollars. And so I had a ton of meetings. I kept pushing back, convinced the folks here on campus to move forward. And we did it. It's one of those things that it may not have been career ending, but it would have been career limiting had it not worked out. But you've got to keep that confidence in yourself and take those risks. And it worked out really well and really made us a leader in this particular area. So, I guess we all take risks. That was a good example, but just don't be scared to take those risks.
Thank you for that response, Greg. Daniel?
Yeah, so my response is similar to Greg. So now he's stealing the responses. So, I don't know that it's the greatest risk, but I agree that I took a great risk leaving a tenured position to move on to other administrative roles, and that came from some advice and introspection when I met with one of my mentors. So always have good mentors in your corner. And he actually said to me, with great reward comes great risk. And so I took the leap out of a tenured position into a non-tenured track, and I've been out of that ever since. And it's been rewarding. So that was a great risk because you have such stability in an uncertain and then moving into an uncertain time. The second risk is really risks associated with the roles we have as vice presidents and leaders of divisions. And I remember risking really alienating colleagues in a decision I had to make to merge services. And the result of merging services was to improve service for students. And so that's where having a moral compass is important. And being mission driven is important, because if you are mission driven and you stay true to that mission driven purpose and have a good moral compass, then you're going to make the right decisions for students, especially when you're in this field. So at the end of the day, the decision had to be made, and it improved service for students, centralizing quite a bit for them, so they didn't have to keep going to different places. And it reduced cost for students in the long term. So don't be afraid to follow your moral compass and be mission driven. Especially if you're focused in on the right audience and the right outcomes.
Thank you, Daniel. Would any of the other panelists like to add anything else? All right, if not, we'll move on to our next question. What do you consider before promoting someone? Frank?
I definitely consider not only how they affect students in the division I'm in student life, but how they collaborate across campus. To me, that's incredibly important. I want leaders in my division who know how to collaborate, who understand the bigger picture of an institution and not just what's best for us or best for our division or in a silo, but what's best for the student experience, what's best for the university, and big picture thinkers, and know how to, like we talked about earlier, know how to say when they're wrong. Like, say, I made a mistake and I owned up to it, and this is what I learned from it. Those are the people I want on my side that know how to truly lead and take ownership for their leadership.
Thank you, Frank. Benita?
So when I look to promote someone, of course, we're going to make sure that they've had the training and they have the skills and abilities to do the functions of the job. But I look to see if they are mentally prepared and to take on whatever this new initiative, whatever the new roles and responsibilities are. I became a supervisor for the first time when I was 23 years old. And looking back at my 23-year-old self, I'm thinking, what were they thinking? I'm supervising a big call unit, and and I had old people reporting to me. One supervisor was 40 years old. I was 23. She was old, and she ran all over me. So I wasn't prepared mentally for that job at that time. So I look to make sure that the person is not just prepared with their skill set, but they're mentally ready to take on the initiative or the new jobs, duties, and responsibilities. And then I try to provide them as much support as I can.
Thank you, Benita. Tammy?
I think I'm getting like Greg now. I should have just waited because Benita, that's exactly what I was going to share. Is that making sure that the person you are promoting is really set up for success. They have the resources available. They're mentally ready for the position. I remember a time, actually, I had just become a new vice president, and it was an unfortunate situation with my payroll director who we had to let go kind of abruptly. And her aide, her assistant, knew the job in and out, but just didn't have the confidence to want to take on that. So being able to kind of build that confidence with the person, to say, you got this, you can do it, encouraging the person and saying that, you can step out, we can promote you. And if it doesn't work, we have no problem with allowing you to go back to that role. We want to make sure you're prepared as much as possible for it. So really being able to provide that additional coaching and just being there as a support system. And again, making sure that they have all the tools that they need for success. So, but thank you, Benita.
Tammy, thank you. Daniel?
Yeah, I agree with all of what's been said. And I would add, I just remember in the playground when your parents tell you to be nice, don't kick your friends. Just be you. I look for someone who is nice to their colleagues, who completes deadlines, who is very collaborative. I echo that as well about collaboration. Typically those who are promoted, they demonstrate behaviors that let me know that they want to be promoted. They are, taking on extra assignments without me asking them to do so. They are really, chiming in productively during team meetings and looking at solution-based discussion instead of just providing the problem, throwing the problem on the table and kicking the problem around until all we're focused on is the problem. So I rather enjoy, and I think my colleagues here would agree, the person who comes in and says, oh, that there was this problem, this is how we addressed it, or this is how we should address the problem. So someone that's always really thinking in terms of solution-based And of course, someone who's always thinking about students and student-centered. We are, at least for me, I believe in being a student-ready professional and a student-ready institution. And so I listen for individuals who speak in terms of deficit perspective. If someone says, well, that student shouldn't be here, we shouldn't have recruited that student, that strikes me as someone that isn't really aligned with our mission and probably is not ready and needs some more time and some more training potentially. We should be at a place where we are student focused and student centered. So we should be looking at ourselves and enhancing what we do. So anyone that is philosophically and theoretically thinking in that way are those who are, in my opinion, are ready to be promoted. And of course, I echo everything that's been said prior.
Daniel, thank you so much for sharing that. Frank?
I just wanted to add in addition to what I said earlier, every time I promote someone, I also think about the people I'm not promoting. And what does that say to them? The message that sends, or a university looking, it's important to work with human resources to see who's being promoted at the institution, whether it be different genders, races, identities. It says a lot and can send a real message out to the rest of the community. So thinking about it from those two perspectives of who's not being promoted and why, and also on the diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective of who we're promoting and raising to different levels at the institution.
Thank you, Frank. Greg?
So everything that everyone has said, I completely agree with. I thought I was going to be speechless on this one, but then Daniel sparked something that I heard once upon a time. And it sounds so simple, but it's really hard sometimes. And I look for this, I hold myself to this, and I look for this in others that I'm going to promote. And that is say what you're going to do and then do what you say. And that goes to that accountability thing. And so I look for folks that have not only brought these solutions, but then I'll turn that around and ask, well, what part of that solution can you help implement? And I don't pressure them to commit, but once they do commit, do they follow through? Do they hit that goal? And those are the folks you really want on your team, or those folks that are willing to go the extra mile, because sometimes you make those commitments and you don't realize that onion is 10 layers deep instead of 3. And the folks that are willing to keep digging and really get that result, those are the ones that you really want to have around. I think about it as like the desert island, right? Who do you want on that island with you? It's the person that's going to keep going until you're off the island.
Great point, Greg. Thank you so much. Renata?
Well, Greg just took what I was about to say, the extra mile, and that's the person. I agree. I agree with what everyone else stated. But that individual that when you don't even ask, they do. And they will do other things. You can call them whenever you need something and they don't have a problem with assisting. That individual who doesn't mind going that extra mile. That's what I look for. Thanks, Greg.
Panelists, you all had great answers, and we'll move on to our next question. How do you expect our industry to change in the next 5 years? Daniel?
Oh, I didn't realize. Oh, I'm first. So I expect that a lot of, and we're reading this, a lot of the enhancements with COVID-19 will stay. We would expect to see a lot more flexibility services to our students in the late night, evening, and weekend hours using tele resources, telehealth, telecounseling, teleadvising. We've taught ourselves that for all the years in which higher education has said, well, we need this to do that we really can do that. Some better than others, and we will obviously improve as a profession. But that I certainly think that quite a bit of the changes that we saw during COVID-19 will continue going forward. You know, we also know that there's going to be a greater dependency on collaboration across institutions in order to ensure the success of our students. You know, greater dependency on collaboration with community partners to make sure that we are stopping the bleed of students who are not completing their degrees. So trying to find more opportunities for students who have stopped out to return and finish their degrees, because there's more accountability for higher education. And so that's going to require a different mindset and greater flexibility. We invited NASPA president, what's his name? Oh my goodness, I wanted to say George Koo, but it's not George Koo. The NASPA president who came, Kevin Kruger came to our campus at the beginning during our Faculty Staff Institute virtually, and he said that the profession no longer can afford to have individuals who are individual experts at one thing. We have to be much more flexible as professionals because our students demand it.
Thank you, Daniel. Would any other panelists like to respond to that question? Benita?
So I'm going to answer from the perspective of a community college. And Wake Tech is the largest community college in North Carolina. And our technical programs are going to continue to be even more important. There are thousands of jobs that are open now that employers are looking for, but they're having difficulty finding employees that have the skills to do those jobs. So they come to Wake Tech so that we can train their candidates on how to get those jobs done. So like our partnerships with companies, organizations like Amazon, you know, a lot of, you know, what they need, all the technology that's in their warehouses, you know, welding has become so very technical. So it's not just our transfer piece, but also our technology piece. So I just see that as the technology keeps growing and changing, then we're going to have to change as well. So that's going to be a big component here at Wake Tech. I think that we're going to also, to pivot a little bit, we're also going to see more and more offerings online. We already do. So this past year, we had to be creative and do a lot of things that we didn't think that we could do before. But we're going to be very competitive and making sure that our students have the skill sets to do the jobs in this ever-changing technology.
Anita, excellent response. Thank you so much. Frank?
I definitely agree with everything that was said, but I'd also add that I think our families looking at the institutions are going to continue at a rapid pace looking at outcomes. Where are they getting jobs? What is the value of this? A liberal arts education now is seen very differently than it was when I went to college. And also the transparency piece. I think we're seeing in our society as a whole, people want transparency. Students are no longer going to just accept, well, that's the rules, that's why they're there. No, they're going to question that, I think, at an increased rate of why things exist the way they do. Why isn't there more flexibility? Why can't this class be offered in a hybrid fashion? It was in the past, it was online, you know, things of that nature. So we have to be prepared to make sure we have the answers to those questions.
Thank you, Frank. Renata, were you raising your hand to respond to that question as well?
I was.
Okay.
And what I just wanted to add is that I think that our population of students, the makeup, the age is going to change. I think I agree with what Benita was saying as far as there are companies out there that are looking for trained, skilled workers, and that you've got a lot of people out there who are in their, you know, who middle age, who have to be retrained. So I think that when we start looking at who will be our students in the future, that we will start looking more at those populations. And we also know that the number of high school students is decreasing and that kids are not necessarily going to college. So I think in the next several years, and we're starting to see that a little bit more. You have companies who do need and do want to retrain individuals. So I believe that we will start to see that shift in who our student makeup will be.
Renata, thank you. And I want to thank all of our other panelists for responding to the question as well. And our last question for today states, in closing, does anyone have any last advice for staff members looking to grow within their organization? Frank?
My advice would be to learn to strike a balance. Several of us talked about earlier in our careers, we said yes, yes, yes to everything and wore many hats, which might have worked for us, but I think it's a fine balance between that and work-life balance. I think you need both. And I don't think it's good advice. I don't advise people just say yes to everything that you're asked, because a good person is going to be stretched incredibly thin. Think about our student leaders on our campuses. Many hold many leadership positions. And so I think it's important to know which things and to critically think about the things cross-divisionally and all to accept, to get to know knowledge about, to say yes to, and then also at times to be able to say no, but with a good reason. And tell your supervisor, just so you know, I was asked to do X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to decline because of X, Y, and Z reasons. I think that shows a lot of strength and true leadership and knowing yourself and knowing what you can give. So I think that's also valuable.
Frank, thank you. Tammy?
So with that, as an add-on to Frank, yes, you don't want to say yes to everything, but you do want to start saying yes. If you haven't said yes before, you want to start saying yes. So you want to definitely provide service back to your institution. You want to look for a mentor. If you can find one on campus, great. If you cannot, go outside your area. But also as important as a mentor is finding an advocate. So someone who can say, elevate your voice. So I think that's also important. And then just be true to the mission of why you're there. I think it's been resounding stated today of why are you at that institution and what can you do to continue to be an advocate for the institution, an ambassador for the institution, for the students, for your colleagues. So as long as you're genuine in what you're doing and putting forth your best foot as far as giving your all and saying that at the end of the day, did I add value? And if you can say that at the end of the day, then all right, you're doing well, and just continue that on. But find that mentor, find that advocate, and do say yes. Not to everything, but still say yes.
Tammy, thank you. Daniel?
Yeah, this is great advice. I'm taking your advice down. So, I'll say it this way. Work to live, don't live to work. Develop a board of directors where you're the CEO. Ask for an agenda when you're invited to meetings. Always ask, what are the next steps when you end a meeting? And always take your vacation day.
Daniel, I just wrote all those down. Thank you, Daniel. Benita?
You're welcome.
So the best advice that I could give is if you are currently in a role in which you're unhappy, and it may be that you're in a role that's part of your stepping stone. We've all had those jobs that we've had to take so that we can get to the next place, and that's fine. But be the best that you can be where you're at. Don't let everybody know that you're unhappy. Don't spread your unhappiness. Just do the best where you're at and make concrete plans to get to where you want to be. Create a map. Put your map on your refrigerator. Put it somewhere where you're going to see it. You know what your next step is, but don't ruin your reputation or your chances by being so unhappy where you're at and you're showing it. I was a military wife for 20 years. And so every time we would move, I would end up giving up a good job and going on to another job and starting over. And I resented that. I was college educated. I'm like, why do I always have to start over? I remember when we were in Germany, I worked in a shoe store. And so here I am, I'm college educated, and I'm trying to get this woman with a size 10 foot to recognize that she's not going to get her foot in this 8-inch shoe. But I was the best shoe person that I could be. And so 4 years later, when we left Germany, I was the manager of the Officers Club. So just do the best where you're at until you can get to the place where you want to be.
That's great advice.
Thank you, Benita. That's wonderful advice. Greg?
So yeah, I'll second the take your vacation. It's kind of the work hard, play hard thing. You know, you have to take your vacation and recharge and come back full of energy. Otherwise, I think, you know, anyone would get burned out at some point. The other one, talking about the opportunities and what you say yes to, and I agree, you do have to be somewhat selective. There are only so many hours in the day, but also don't think that anything's like beneath you or beneath what your next step in your career is, because you know, the vast majority of the time, if someone is asking you to do something, there's a real need for it. And, you know, one example that comes to mind, because it just kind of caught me off guard while I was a pretty young manager at Blue Cross, and we had 3,000 employees, and we got so far behind on claims coming in that they asked for volunteers to come run the little scanning machines to do the scanning of all the claims forms. You know, and you're thinking about that, I'll tell you, it's not fun work. You're taking out the little paper clips and you're putting them in the machine. But, you know, out of 3,000 people, there were like 20 of us that volunteered to do that. And that was it, because it was a 1-shift operation. They asked for volunteers to make it a 3-shift operation. But you know what? I mean, to those customers and to the organization as a whole, that was a really, really important thing. And so back to the, you know, folks you're looking to promote, it's those folks that are willing to do whatever it takes to get that ultimate job done. And so as you're looking for those opportunities, I tend to look for the ones that you think no one else wants to do and jump at those first as you're prioritizing, because that's going to help you stand out. It's just going to help you be that person that's seen as the team player that will do whatever's needed.
Great advice, Greg. Thank you so much. At this time, we want to take a moment and thank all of our panelists. And we also want to take a moment to allow our attendees to post any questions in the Q&A at this time. Great, I have my first question. The first question I have, panelist, states, how do you find opportunities to shine in your current position? Panelists, were you able to hear the question? Benita?
So I'm going to answer for the perspective of having been a tracer for the past year. So no one expected a year like last year. And it was a tough year, it was rough. The way that I was able to shine, I guess, last year, and I won the excellence in leadership because of the leadership, the efforts that we did with safety. And it wasn't because of anything I did on my own, it was because of what my safety team did. It was just in the most challenging moments, doing the best you can do at that point. Stepping up, going to what one of the other panelists said, and taking on the job that nobody else wants to do. You know, I did not want to spend my days calling people to see who they've been in contact with, and then listening to the stories that we've heard over the last year. You know, my mother's in the hospital and I can't go see her and those kinds of things. And so it's when things are the toughest, if you can step up and try to motivate others and, you know, pave a pathway for others, then that's what I do. When things are at the worst, you know, instead of being the doom and gloom person, if you can find just that little bit of light, you know, like we have a little bit of light now with the vaccines and being able to transition back to school. So I just come to work every day. I make a determination before I leave today, somebody's gonna laugh. You know, there's gonna be something that we can laugh at. You know, you have a choice to laugh or to cry. I always choose to laugh if at all possible. So do your part just to make the workplace lighter. You know, you want to be that person that everybody runs to and not run away from. So just look for opportunities to make any given situation a bit better for that moment.
Thank you so much, Benita, for that response. Greg?
Yeah, I'll echo some of what Benita said. I mean, in my experience, it's rare that if you chase the spotlight, you find it. Sometimes it works out, but it's a lot more often that if you just do what needs to be done, the spotlight's going to find you. And those are the things that are going to get the recognition and help you get to whatever that next level is that you're trying to achieve.
Great response. Yep.
Thank you, Greg. Any other questions from our attendees? If so, you can place them in our Q&A. Okay, panelists, here's another question for you all. Would you encourage employees to apply for a position that they are 80% qualified for? Benita and Greg, do you all have your hands raised, or was that from the previous question?
Well, I think I had my hand raised from the previous question, but
Okay.
but I'm going to take, you know, I think the human resources professional should take a shot at answering that question, and my answer is no. You're not, if you're not prepared for it, if you're not fully prepared for it, and also it's a little challenging question because what is the 20% that you don't know? You know, I think I might. You know, what am I getting myself into here with this 20% I'm not sure of? So I think I would have to say, you know, is it that you have the skills and the abilities to do the job, but you may not have, it's now a leadership role and you've never been a supervisor before. So I would ask myself, well, do I have the time to help this person become a good leader? And if I do have the time, then yes, I may take that. That 20% is lack of actual supervision, but you have the initiative, the drive, the skills, the abilities, then yes, I might take the 80%. But if I need somebody to hit the ground running in leadership and supervision, this is a group that's a troublesome little group that I need somebody to come in and fix that area. Morale's low, there's high turnover in this little area. So then no, I need somebody that already has the proven leadership skills. So we would have to ask questions about what's the 20% before we could commit. But hopefully we know that a lot of times leaders are going to need some development. And so you may not get 100% of what you want, but I'm not going to get 20% of crazy.
Thank you, Benita. Greg?
So my answer was going to be maybe, and I'll tell you what the qualification is. I want to hear your plan. You know, when you come in and or even on a cover letter, you know, I'm thinking more of an existing employees is the way I read this. As an existing employee, come make your pitch. You know, recognize what the weaknesses are. What's your plan to close those weaknesses? Convince me that you're going to grow, what that time frame is. And I think in that case, you know, it's a lot of times that works out really, really well. It's the folks that just say, well, I've got some of what you're looking for, not the rest. I'll throw my name in the hat. That's probably not going to have the same chance of success. So, you know, again, it's that introspection. What are you missing? What are those skills, like Benita said? And then come up with that plan of how you're going to close that gap.
Thank you, Greg. And Daniel?
Yeah, you know, for me, I'll give a slightly different answer. You know, when I guess, you know, you have to remember when you're looking at a job description, remember that there are times when you look at a job description and you feel, man, boy, geez, this job was written for me, because it really calls to you. It's a position that you feel you can grow in, that you can work with the organization or department. You read through the duties and you're excited because, you know, so it just kind of speaks to you. Those are the positions that I would apply to. If a position only speaks to me halfway or part of the way, then that's really telling me more about, and I'm just speaking for self, about fit potentially. Now, you could always, you know, kind of misread a position description and you know, kind of throw your hat in the ring, but I would not. For me, the organization has to really speak to me, because when you're in that interview, it's going to come across your passion for the job, your ability to do those tasks, your desire to grow in the position. That all will come across to the hiring manager. Then you'll find yourself wondering, you know, why did I apply to this position when I really didn't want the job, or really didn't feel like I'm qualified for the job? That's my take.
Thank you, Daniel. Renata?
I guess in my field, you know, being over faculty, a lot of us never were taught how to teach. Okay, we had some other profession, we had some other discipline, some other degree. So, you know, we came into teaching still having to learn how to teach. And so I think it depends on that position. Clearly, there are certain skills, you have to have certain qualifications in order to teach at the collegiate level. And so, you know, that has to be part of the 80%. I think the 20% sometimes is, in my opinion, the growth, because like I said, there are minimum requirements of having a, you know, degree in your area, or so many graduate hours. And it depends, because I've had some faculty who had outstanding qualifications and great pedigree when you looked at their CV, but when they got in the classroom to try to teach, it just wasn't there. They just couldn't connect to the student. They could not translate that material. So it depends. I think it depends.
Thank you, Renata, for sharing that information as well. And Tammy?
You know, I think I'm going to echo what Greg has stated earlier. I was probably one of those individuals. My very first vice president role for finance and administration, I didn't have everything that the job description asked for, but I knew that this is what I've always wanted to do. I knew as soon as I got into higher ed, this was my path. So I tried to do everything. I tried to be very strategic in the positions I was taking, the education I was getting, what have you, to get that experience. So when I wound up getting the knock saying, are you interested in this role? I jumped at it because I'm like, yes, of course I am. I got into the interview though. And I remember it was one of those airport interviews and you're sitting around the table with about 15, 20 people and they're, you know, asking you all the questions and I'm on it. I'm feeling good and feeling hot and all that. And then it came to an area that I knew I didn't have the background in. So what I did, and I think this goes back to kind of, again, what we've been stating throughout, being upfront and open and honest and saying, I don't have experience in, at the time it was in investments. You know, my role, I went from being, like I said, like a financial analyst to a director of financial planning to an executive director to an associate dean to now going for a vice president role of a liberal arts college. So for me, it was a big jump, but I knew, again, to Greg's point, what am I going to do to fill that deficiency? What can I do? What can I try to learn? And I kind of laid out the plan, like, okay, this is where I have my shortfall, but these are the steps I'm going to take to become proficient in that area. And I remember the chair of the investment committee saying, oh, I'm going to help you with that. And just getting that assurance and doing my own research and learning as much as I could about it. Once you got into it, the practical came and went from there. So I guess I'm one of those individuals. I'm like, if you have that game plan and you're confident that you have everything else but one or two aspects, I say go for it.
Thank you, Tammy. I will turn it back over to Maura. It doesn't look like we are showing any more questions in the Q&A. Panelists, thank you all so much today for your for being here. We really do appreciate you. And I'll send it over to Maura.
Thank you so much, Consuela. Thank you, panelists. This was fantastic. You provided such insightful and relatable information. I think that it's so refreshing sometimes to hear some new ideas as a staff member, but then also to know that what you're doing might be right on track for what the leadership of the CRC institutions are looking for. So we appreciate all of your time. We appreciate Consuela for moderating the panel today. And attendees, thank you so much for submitting such wonderful questions. As we move forward into the summer, don't forget CRC is not complete with all of our events. We still have our library workshop coming up on June 17th for all of our library staffs and our staff professional development summer conference on July 15th. And so check out the CRC website. This session will also be recorded and shared on the CRC website with all of our previous sessions from this year. And we look forward to seeing you all again next year as we continue the mini series in the 2021-2022 academic year. Thank you again, everyone, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.